Welcome to today's webinar, Automating Grants, Accounting, and Management. Today's webinar is sponsored by PyanGo. I'm Mark Brousseau, an industry analyst and researcher specializing in accounts payable, accounts receivable, and document automation. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. A few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All participants' lines have been muted to ensure call quality. Please submit your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A tool on your screen. An on-demand recording of this event will be sent to you automatically. There's no need for you to request it. And if you're interested in learning more about PyanGo or the topics we discussed during today's webinar, we encourage you to visit the resources section of the PyanGo website. Let's face it, nonprofits and government organizations want to be good stewards of donor money. The thing is, studies show that up to 44% of an organization's time can be spent on grants management activities that don't directly relate to program delivery. So how did we get here? What can we do about it? Well, managing grants and subawards can be complex. It can be time-consuming. It can be risky. Nonprofits have to deal with multiple stakeholders and multiple locations, multiple departments, lots and lots of administrative tasks, lots of project requirements, and ever-increasing regulations. The challenge is even greater for NetSuite ERP users that rely on manual approaches to managing grants and subawards. Many of you use spreadsheets to manage grants. Some of you try to manage grants and subawards by modifying systems that were designed to do something else. Well, the thing is, these manual and semi-automated approaches to grants and subaward management create 5 really big issues. The first is operational bottlenecks. For many NetSuite users, managing grants means pasting together information from multiple systems, sorting through disparate spreadsheets, tracking information provided by different shareholders. In some of your organizations, staff members have to maintain their own systems for managing grants. And when you've got to manage several grants under a single umbrella, well, that makes things really hard. In a manual environment, there's also a good chance of errors. Financial records can go missing, funds might be placed in the wrong accounts, bid procedures may not be followed. But that's not the only issue. You also have burdensome compliance issues. Manual and semi-automated grants management processes make it hard to comply with mandates and grant requirements, or even to enforce donor terms and conditions. You also are likely to have poor communication and collaboration when you rely on manual and semi-automated grants management processes. You're going to have multiple people from multiple departments with multiple locations, all trying to get at the single source of truth. It's hard for stakeholders to collaborate in this type of environment. And finally, manual and semi-automated approaches to grants and subaward management don't provide the reporting that nonprofits desperately need, especially in times like these. It's difficult to accurately update funding agencies on how money's being spent or to measure the social impact of your efforts. Managing information on multiple grants, well, that could be especially burdensome. It's not uncommon for staff to become frustrated by the amount of time that they spend on reporting. Left unchecked, the types of issues I just described can waste lots of time and resources. It can jeopardize grant funds. It can create compliance headaches. It can negatively impact an organization's reputation with its funding agencies. And that is why more NetSuite users are automating their grants and subaward processes with solutions that are native in NetSuite. These solutions extend NetSuite's grant tracking capabilities, and they do it in 4 important ways. They provide full grant management and accounting. They provide matching of grants with other funding sources. They automate direct and indirect cost calculations. And they automate pass-through subaward expense tracking. Automating grants and subaward management is a game changer for nonprofit organizations. First, it helps you streamline your operations. Grants management solutions for NetSuite make it easy to manage the grant and subaward process from beginning to end. The technology tracks grant revenue and expenses automatically. It also performs indirect cost calculations. It automates chargebacks to donors, and it effortlessly matches dollar for dollar grants with other grants. Grants management solutions for NetSuite also can generate outbound sub-award grants. But that's not all they do. It also helps improve your accuracy. Grants management solutions for NetSuite ensure that all grant information is accurate. For instance, the technology records all grant lifecycle changes. It also reduces your compliance burden. Grants management solutions for NetSuite enforce compliance and grant expenses based on donor terms and conditions. The technology also streamlines communication and collaboration. Information stored in a grants management solution is centralized and able to be shared or exported as necessary. And an automated grants management solution enhances visibility. It helps you demonstrate that you're a faithful steward of funds by putting information about your organization's grants-funded projects at your users' fingertips. The technology integrates with NetSuite to provide real-time visibility into grant expenses, into revenue, and into other details. This is great news for finance pros like you. But you know what? Donors also benefit from grants and subawards management. For starters, it improves their trust in your processes. Donors want to know their money is being spent the way they intended. Clear and regular communications with donors, well, that can head off problems. Grants management solutions also eliminate budget overruns. The technology enforces compliance in grant expenses, and grant management solutions for NetSuite automatically match grants with other funding sources. For instance, dollar for dollar grants can be matched to other grants. Automation also eliminates returned funds. Grants management solutions for NetSuite manage the entire grant process from beginning to end, helping to ensure that funds are used to their maximum potential. Automation also improves operational efficiency. Grants management solutions for NetSuite streamline operations through accurate indirect cost calculations and automated chargebacks. And automating grants and subaward management reduces the possibility of those unpleasant surprises. Donors want to know as soon as possible that a nonprofit or government organization is going to be unable to meet its conditions. Grants management solutions for NetSuite make it easy for nonprofits to review progress against the project plans agreed to with a donor. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from a nonprofit organization that has automated its grants and subaward management with a solution that is native in NetSuite. Meet Kessler Foundation. Matthew Hudson, Senior Grants Accountant at Kessler Foundation, and Matthew Weiner, Manager of Sponsored Research Administration, are going to tell us about their automation journey with a solution that's native in NetSuite. Matt, welcome. Tell us a little bit about Kessler Foundation and your role.
Thanks, Mark. I'd be happy to. Kessler Foundation is a public charity dedicated to improving the lives and employment outcomes of people with physical and cognitive disabilities caused by stroke, MS, injuries to the brain, spinal cord, and other chronic conditions within our 10 research centers. In our Center for Grant Making, we fund multiple initiatives to nonprofits around the country to expand employment opportunities to improve the quality of life for people with disabilities. Kessler Foundation is affiliated with Kessler Institute for Rehabilitation. We are located in northern New Jersey. My role at the foundation is Manager of Sponsored Research Administration within the finance department. I've been at the foundation for almost 13 years now. I administratively manage all research grant opportunities submitted. Funding comes from a contract I review and negotiate. When an award is made, I manage the administration of the grant or contract throughout its life cycle for compliance, reporting amendments, and closeout. Our scientists are continuously collaborating with other sites on opportunities. For those awards with collaborators, we issue sub-awards to them and monitor that site throughout the life cycle. I am the main administrative contact for research. I assist and support our centers as needed.
Matthew Hudson, tell us about your role in the organization.
Sure, definitely. I have been the grants and staff accountant for a little over 2 years at the foundation. I account for items such as the grants, do financial reporting on the grants, donor contribution accounting, bank reconciliations, and other general accounting items.
Matt, tell us a little bit about the challenges with the way the Kessler Foundation previously managed its grants.
Keeping track of grant information is extremely vital to this organization and other nonprofits. Which center at our organization is initiating the submission? Who is the PI and their team for that particular application? Have all internal approvals for a submission been met? What opportunities have been submitted, funded, or rejected? Keeping a calendar for reporting due, known as milestones, across over 100 active projects and reporting to senior management, that was a very big challenge.
Matt, you mentioned that keeping track of grants is vitally important at Kessler Foundation. Why is grants management so strategically important?
From a high-level perspective, the foundation needs to have concise information available to show our senior management, board of trustees, donors, and other stakeholders the foundation is meeting its own strategic goals and research. In terms of sponsored research, what is our sponsored funding portfolio made of? What are our numbers of federal, state, nonprofits, and philanthropic awards? Are we actually submitting and receiving funding in all of our centers and specific research sectors or areas of interest to our board and donors? Our development team utilizes this as well to coordinate with potential donors who may want their gift to expand on a specific line of research in which we have been previously successful. This also aids in tracking the career path of our postdocs and our research scientists.
So what was the tipping point when you realized that Kessler Foundation needed a better way to track its grants?
Well, as I mentioned, we have 10 active research centers. We submit many opportunities throughout the year. Last year, we submitted 125 applications. The tipping point for us came with the knowledge that there had been opportunities that had been submitted without research administration, finance, or senior management knowledge and approval. We also had awards that were made without knowledge of the original submission. That really was the tipping point. We knew we had to change the process, get a handle on our grants that we were submitting and our awards. We had to change this process, how it would be done from the initial stage. So the grant management solution allowed for this new process to take place.
Matt, tell us a little bit about the process the Kessler Foundation used to evaluate potential grants management solutions. And why did you choose PyanGo?
We had already planned to change our accounting system, but at this time we needed to have a grant management component as part of it. So we reached out to the community of independent research institutes, which Kessler Foundation is one. We asked them, what did they use to get an idea of how they were conducting grant management and what were they using for their accounting needs, including grant management capabilities. That was the important part. We also considered our price range for evaluating a solution.
So talk to me about the process of deploying the PyanGo solution and getting your staff trained.
We started out with several Zoom calls with the PyanGo technical consultants. We learned about our organization, our specific needs regarding grant management. We saw how the system worked, provided some initial granting data that was uploaded so we can get a feel of how this information would be processed. Together with the technical consultants, we customized the system specifically to our needs, our terminology, and how we operate and conduct our business. This was very important. The system was tested to ensure what was supposed to happen did. If there was ever a problem or question, it was quickly solved and answered by the support team. We had 3 training sessions for our staff using PyanGo, and we used teams to have those training sessions. We showed a demonstration with one of our scientists going through the entire process of how the system would work for the researcher regarding grant management.
Matthew Hudson, grants management wasn't the only thing that Kessler Foundation has automated using the PyanGo platform. Tell us about that.
So as an accountant, one of our main goals with PyanGo was automating our indirect cost and revenue processes. And in order to kind of illustrate why this was so important, I kind of want to take a step back and describe what our process was before PyanGo. And this process may sound kind of familiar to what other accountants do in this field. So the process would typically be exporting data from a legacy accounting system, compiling the data, confirming it that it's actually accurate, and check it for user errors, and then bring this data into a separate Excel template to run indirect cost, being whatever percentage you're contracted at for each of your grants. After that was done, I would have to re-export that to another Excel file and re-import it into the legacy system. This process would then have to be repeated for revenue as well. In totality, I would say this process took about 3 to 4 hours on a monthly basis. However, after this process was done, it wouldn't be able to account for any journal entries entered after it was done, meaning that the 3 and 4 hours that I put into it could kind of be invalidated by future transactions. With that being said, with PyanGo, on the other hand, we were able to work with the programmers to have a process where I could run a simple query, run the time period that I want to run, however many grants I want to run, whether it's one or all of them. And basically within a click of a button, within 30 seconds, I could have that information that used to take 3 or 4 hours. And the beautiful part about this is, to kind of repeat what Mark said earlier, it improves accuracy. And I think most importantly, it improves transparency. So my superiors and my colleagues could then look at the indirect cost and revenue journal entries and not have to figure out how I did the entry. They could kind of look at the automated entry and go from there. Additionally, we actually were able to replicate this process with our fringe benefit allocations as well. Our controller used to spend a great deal of time doing this, and I can't speak directly on this topic, but I know that it probably saved him at least 1 or 2 days in processing time.
Matt Weiner, what benefits has Kessler Foundation achieved by deploying the PyanGo solution?
With our new grant management process, referring back to that tipping point, all information about an opportunity or a new source of funding goes through my office first. This allows me to have control over the initial stages and to make sure I have all of the information. It's not slipping through the cracks. The reporting. Another benefit, system allows for flexibility in reporting with CSV, Excel, PDF files. These are customizable reporting for what data you need. This provides high-level reporting to senior management and board of trustees, referring back to the strategically importance. We know at any time what opportunities are in the pipeline. And if we are meeting our strategic research goals of the organization, are we submitting to opportunities and winning award? That's the key. A repository for every related document to an opportunity, award, and milestone. This is a fantastic benefit. You know where everything is. You're not hunting around for files. It's right here. Milestones, one of my most favorite features of the PyanGo grant management system. This is so important, and it refers back to compliance. As I mentioned, we have a lot of active awards. There's a lot of reporting, as people who are listening know. And the more awards you have, the more reports, and they're spread out through over the year. This has always been an extremely difficult thing to keep track of. So for the milestones, which is customizable by type and date due, it sends out auto emails to all the responsible people. It can have the template for the report uploaded right there. You're able to do the report, you get the notification, the reminder, and you're following the compliance. It's absolutely necessary to have this to keep track of. So that is probably one of the best features of the system. There are many others, but this is one of the best. It really takes care of the process of reporting for all of these awards.
Matt, what lessons learned can you share with your peers listening in today?
You have to know you're going to be intimately involved in the customization of the system. This is not an off-the-shelf system. Put together a great team of people at your nonprofit that's willing to do the initial work. There is great benefit afterwards, but there is a buy-in at the beginning. You have to do your work. Our goal was to have the grant management PyanGo side work seamlessly with NetSuite accounting side, as when an opportunity is funded and the accounting is now in NetSuite. These two areas have to be mapped and linked together. And I have to say the technical support we got for this was fantastic and got everything accomplished with very little difficulty for this.
Mike, what lessons learned should NetSuite customers take away from the experiences that Kessler Foundation has had in automating its grants management process?
Let me add what Matt was just talking about, and that is, again, the buy-in from the functional side, right, from the grant administrator, to make sure that you have someone who is available and allocated to working with PyanGo and the NetSuite implementation team to go live, to go through that process, and to be able to look at your existing processes and understand, what's important, but what could maybe be left behind. Because again, we're implementing a new system at Kessler. We did this last year, and we actually did did it fairly quickly with our regular implementation lifecycle. But as we did that, it was important that they were able to adopt some of the new capabilities that we had in PyanGo Grants, as well as what NetSuite offers as an overall ERP system. So you want to be able to take what you really need from your old legacy system and bring that forward into the new one, but not necessarily just implement the exact same system that you had from the legacy. And I think we were able to do that fairly well with the overall Kessler implementation.
Benefits of automating grants accounting and management are proven and they're compelling. The question many of you may have right now is, how do I get started? How do I begin my automation journey? To help you get started, I'm going to hand it off to Mike to give you a demonstration of the PyanGo solution. Mike?
A key thing here about PyanGo Grants, it is built on top of the NetSuite platform. So you're looking at NetSuite, but we have a whole menu system that's dedicated to doing a variety of activities within grants. So I'm going to jump right into what we've really been talking about over the last 10 to 15 minutes is the managing the grant award. So here I have this award called the Wounded Warrior Research Grant, and we have a description about what it's related to. We can assign that grant to a principal or grant administrator, and this highlights some of the integration here is we have this little pop-up that shows that this is the employee and what their ID is, their job title, etc. So that just highlights again how we've integrated within NetSuite. And these labels can all be renamed as needed. So if you don't use the term principal investigator, we can use grant administrator or any other type of term. You can set up grants for single year, multi-year, rank grants according to priority. So we have a wide variety of attributes that we track for each grant award. We track all of the financials for the award, not only total revenue and expenses to date, but also your current fiscal year's award expenses and revenue. And then, of course, that can tell us basically what your cash position is for a particular grant. We track a variety of dates. Dates are really important with grants. So when does it start? When does it end? When did we apply for it? When is the execution date? When was it last modified? So we can track all of that. If you're not as interested in some of these fields, we can remove them. And that's part of that customization process that Matt was talking about, is to work with your grants team to identify exactly how you want your grants to be displayed and managed within NetSuite. Then if I go to the bottom here, here's the milestones that Matt was also talking about. So we can set up a variety of different kinds of milestones. These are not just limited to this list here. You can define your own milestones, and then we will send out alerts to the people responsible as well as the team involved in it on a, let's say, 2 weeks prior to the milestone, 4 weeks, etc. We can work with you on that particular timing for the milestone. Most grants, I can keep track of my expected payments. So if I'm receiving funds in advance of a particular grant, I can schedule those and then link them to actual invoices and payments once they are created within NetSuite. I can set up terms and conditions for each of my grants. In this case here, I have an indirect cost rate that will be then used to determine my indirect cost expenses. And we do that, if I jump over here to the allowable expenses, by identifying specific accounts, departments, etc., whatever granularity you need. You can identify what is allowable for this grant up to a certain cap. And then from there, we can sweep through the NetSuite transactions associated with this grant, apply that indirect cost, and generate a NetSuite invoice. All of the transactions that are associated with this particular grant, and I can drill down and look at a specific invoice and see that it was created as part of our automated process to do indirect billing. So this would be for a cost reimbursable type grant. So it indicates that it's a cost recovery invoice for the Wounded Warrior Research, and it had picked up a variety of expenses that had been charged on different vendor bills. So we have complete traceability or audit trail throughout our grant system, showing which transactions and how they're related between the expenses and the revenue. We can also keep track of what effort has potentially been allocated to this particular grant. So for you have your variety of employees that might be working on a grant. Are they 50%? 100% dedicated, etc. So we can also use that information when we're generating salary-based effort reporting and indirect or direct cost calculations. And we can also keep track of grant matching. Many of you will have this scenario that you may receive grants, but that grant is dependent upon another grant matching it, maybe dollar for dollar, or in this case, 25% on the dollar that we would be tracking. And from there, we can then take a look at, okay, which transactions are in the system that are related to the Wounded Warrior grant, but have a secondary match occurring, and what was that match amount? So again, that sometimes is an important condition of your grant, is to be able to document the fact that you are using matching funds. That could be from your general fund or from, in this case, a separate grant that is paired together with this primary grant. And then speaking of primary grants, to our allocations. So I can allocate our grant to either projects or, in this case, subaward. So a subaward in this case is a pass-through grant, meaning that I might be the prime recipient of a grant, but I need to allocate this for a subcontractor or a vendor to perform the work, or maybe this is being done in a different country. So I'm going to partner with a nonprofit in a different part of the world, and they're going to implement, in this case, the lab research. So if I switch over to my subaward here, this looks fairly similar to the grant, modeled basically the same. We can keep track of all the dates and so forth and the award amount. But in this case, this is bound award amounts that we are going to be providing to another organization. We can establish a budget. I can also specify what it would be used for. I can track the same terms and conditions that we have set up on the inbound side. We can do this on the outbound side, and I can set up milestones as well. So these would be audits or reports that your grantees would be required to submit back to you. And again, I'm mentioning the grantee, and that's actually a vendor within NetSuite. So I can then have transactions working with the vendor as far as issuing vendor bills and payments to that vendor. Now, one of the key things that we'll do, you can see we have a couple of bills and bill payments, but I can also track grantee expenses. So we provide a custom transaction within NetSuite that will show all of the expenses that a grantee might have. This is a non-posting transaction, so that it does not actually affect your financials, but you're able to show from an audit perspective exactly what has been spent by the grantee. So it fills out the full 360-degree view of the grant, starting from the inbound side and going all the way to the outbound side. Let me wrap up with a little bit of grant reporting. Since all of this data is on the NetSuite platform, we can surface it on your homepage and have various KPIs set up. We can keep track of grant amounts by administrator or by status, whether you have a pending grant or a grant that's been submitted but not yet approved. So we can keep track of all of those different lifecycle status values and show that in a nice grant form. And then finally, we can generate what's called the Federal Financial Report. I believe it's the 425 report. And what we do here is we actually produce the standard report that you might submit for federal related grants based upon a particular time range. And so you can see in this case from July 1st through the end of December 31st, 2019, we'll sweep through all of the NetSuite transactions and calculate your receipts and expenditures for that. So then you can save that, review it, and submit it back to the government for your financial grant reporting requirements.
Thank you so much, Mike. And with that, we're going to enter the Q&A portion of our webinar. Matt, the first question is for you. One of our attendees is wondering how difficult it was to train users on the PyanGo solution.
Not difficult at all. It was about 20 minutes to half an hour for each lesson. We had everyone on the Teams call and we showed them how to use it, how to log in. Then we were off to the races. We were showing everyone the new process of how internally we get the information to me, how it's inputted into the system, and how it goes through. It was very simple. It was a very simple process.
Matt, this question is for both of you. One of our attendees wants to know what features are in PyanGo that weren't native to NetSuite.
So when we were sourcing new applications, new accounting applications and platforms to go with, not many of them had the ability to do the automation of indirect cost and revenue. And specifically, when I was asking these questions to potential platforms, I made a point of exception items when calculating indirect costs. And at that point, there are certain companies that did not know what I was trying to get at, but then NetSuite and PyanGo, they knew exactly what the goal was and how to get there. And it was just something that was refreshing to have another company be able to address that kind of issue. Because as I was talking about doing indirect costs before, obviously using Excel and exporting data does save time, but where a lot of time is spent is manually assessing exceptions to grants. Certain grants allow indirect costs on equipment, subrecipient costs, others do not. And so as we saw earlier in the presentation, the ability to establish those ahead of time saves a tremendous amount of time. And that's something I didn't see it during any other platform's presentation.
Matt Weiner?
I would say for me, it's really in the automation of the information. That's one of the main things that I've always had to struggle with, because a lot of people keep this information on Excel files and requests come in, information is needed right now, and it's a lot of sometimes hunting and pecking for information to find it. And this solution really took care of all of that. Like I say, you put the information in, you have it. So now it's as it comes along, you're not reinventing the wheel. It's actually a very easy process to put it in. And for the reporting itself, it saves me a lot of time.
Another attendee is wondering, how do you manage grant balances across years? Does PyanGo carry display ending balance for 1 year and beginning balance for the next, or does it do something else? So how about it, Mike? How does PyanGo handle that?
That's actually, again, the beauty of being on the platform with NetSuite. That cash balance year over year is actually tracked as part of core financials. And so as transactions occur, that is calculated automatically. And then we will reference that on the grant award itself. That's again, kind of the marriage between NetSuite financials and the grant award system.
Gentlemen, another attendee is wondering, do you develop grant budgets in PyanGo, or do you develop them outside of PyanGo and then import the final result into PyanGo?
For budgets themselves, they are developed outside of when it comes to submissions and awards. But as far as the input of the budgets, that would be Matt.
Right. So in that regard, I'm able to upload the budgets into NetSuite, and NetSuite does also have reporting that could be used in that regard, but those numbers could also be viewed in PyanGo as well. So if there's a user that doesn't want to get into the nitty-gritty of grant budgets, they could also see that information in PyanGo in a more summarized format.
One more question from an attendee, Matt. What reporting do your PIs see?
Submissions, you can report in any variety of detail. You can report by the center, by the organization overall, the center, by the PI, by a specific research sector that they are involved with. So you can really drill down, and you're getting all of the detail. The page that you showed before, you have a lot of different bits of information. You're able to pull those details into the report, so you can customize the report to show what you need. If you download it into Excel, of course, you can manipulate the files and further customize it to how you want it. But it really depends upon what your need is and who are the people who actually need to see this information. You can have reports set up that they can run at any time frame, so you're always getting reports out, and you could just send them right to a person right through the system. So it's a big time saver.
And that will be our final word. Matt, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to join us. If you had additional questions for any of our speakers, or you'd like more information, we encourage you to contact them using the information now displayed on your screen. And with that, on behalf of PyanGo, this is Mark. So thank you so much. Hope to talk to you again soon.